Hello and welcome to the debut episode of the DeVaney Music Podcast. I'm your host, Ian DeVaney. For those of you who do not know me, I'm a music enthusiast, born and raised in Duluth, Minnesota, and currently living in Superior, Wisconsin. I have over 10 years of experience as a concert promoter and graduated from North Central University with a degree in music business. I have done social media for the OC Supertones and have also served as a writer for Indie Vision Music, among other things. The purpose of this podcast is simply to share my love for music with others and to give artists a chance to share about their music and what matters to them. On today's episode, I will be interviewing Eric Cyr, the frontman for the band Cyr and The Cosmonauts, that's CYR. I have had the pleasure of working with Eric over the years, setting up concerts for him, seeing him at shows, and I'm very excited to hear what he has to say today and for him to have the opportunity to share about his new album. So without further ado, here goes. Well, welcome to the DeVaney Music Podcast. I'm your host, Ian DeVaney, and I'm here with my friend Eric Cyr from Cyr and The Cosmonauts. It's great to have you here, Eric.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So you guys just released a new album. Could you tell me a little about that?
Yes. So May 14th, 2021, we released Songs to Sing Before We're Dead, which is the second album that we've put out in the last 3 years or so. 2018, we put out our debut called Calloused. And so this time around took a little longer. We had a pandemic in the midst of the recording, but we got it put out, and so it's been exciting to have that out and start playing some shows and doing some promotion for it.
Okay, that's cool. I have to say, I think that album title is probably one of my favorite album titles that I've seen, along with the artwork. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So the artwork it's from like a 15th century manuscript as a screen of, it's called The Dance of Death, I think, some skeletons dancing and one playing some sort of clarinet thing. Actually, so the first song on the album is called Bones, and I originally had different ideas for the album artwork. I had a couple different thoughts, but then I found this picture when I was looking for a picture to go along with that song Bones, to use as like a single album art. But then I liked how it looked so much, we decided to use it for the full thing. And the title just kind of came into my head before we had recorded or done anything, was to have that title of Songs to Sing Before We're Dead.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. I'd like to get back to a few things you just mentioned, but first I was trying to remember exactly how I met you. And I think I remember, but I was curious to see if you may remember as well.
Yeah, I think it was at a show at Beaner's that I played, right?
Yeah.
We were in the audience, and then we talked about playing a show at the Encounter where you were working at the time.
Yeah, and that's what I was thinking too.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, for everyone who can't see, Eric chose a nice Beaner's mug out of my cupboard for his coffee. So, but yeah, I knew I had met you at a show, and I thought it was at Beaner's.
Yeah.
And then Facebook actually reminded me yesterday that about 6 years ago to the day, I think, was when you came and played at the Encounter.
Oh, okay,
so,
nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that was one of the first shows that Rachel and I had played when we were just starting out. Like, I did a couple events out at Beaner's, and then Jason set us up with a show, and that was like the first things we did really with music in Duluth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Nice. Did you move from somewhere else?
Yeah, we both, my sister and I both, different years came up here to go to college at UMD, and we weren't like doing this kind of music gigging stuff before then anywhere else. But it was like after I came back from doing some missionary work in Belize that we started to play and try to get shows and stuff.
Okay. And so you mentioned that your sister's in the band.
Yep.
Is there anyone else in the band?
Yeah, so right now the Cosmonauts are the two of us, and then Brady Kempfenkel plays drums, and John McLaughlin on keyboard.
Okay.
Yep.
Nice. And who came up with the band name?
I had the idea, and then I ran it by the others with a couple other ideas, and we decided that this was the one that stuck.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, I think it's a good, catchy name. So
Thank you.
I remember when I was first getting into music, I would go through my dad's record collection, or actually more commonly just through his iPod, because that was when those first came out. And frequently I would pick bands to listen to just based upon the name and if it sounded cool. So I think if you have anything that's remotely cool or memorable, that's a good thing.
Yeah. So. Yeah, we had, when it was just Rachel and I and sometimes a couple other people, we played by just Cyr for a while. But number one, it's hard to know how to spell it if you hear it. You just hear Cyr. And then it also, there's a lot of Cyrs in Canada apparently. So just Cyr can get confused with a lot of other things. And so we decided to keep the Cyr part of it, but then add the Cosmonauts to make it more memorable, unique. Nice. And easier to find if you're searching for it.
How did you first get into music?
I first started playing any music in 5th grade, playing trombone, middle school band. And then my dad had a guitar and would play a little bit, not a lot, but I started to teach myself on his guitar, probably like 9th grade. And so I enjoyed doing that and had a friend in high school who played guitar and who got me into trying to write songs a little bit. He wrote a little bit. We would play a lot of like Tom Petty, Paul Simon, Bob Dylan kind of stuff that we would play together sometimes. He taught me how to play Wonderwall.
Okay. Nice. Like the second song everyone knows.
Exactly. And so, but then he was writing some songs, so then I tried it and wrote a lot of terrible songs and eventually got to some better songs.
Okay.
Yeah. And then in college, I majored in music as well. So I stuck with the trombone and did a BA in music and a BA in English. And so kind of writing and music went together there as well.
Okay. Were you ever tempted to start a ska band, or was that never an interest of yours?
There was actually, when I was a freshman in college, there was somebody who was leaving a ska band. I don't know if you ever heard of Coal Car Caboose.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Coal Car Caboose, I don't think it's been a while since they played. But the trombone player in that band I played with in college, and he was leaving the band, and he asked me about it. And they didn't survive much longer after that, but I afterwards regretted that I didn't take him up on the offer to audition.
Yeah, that would have been fun.
It would have been fun.
Yeah, I've actually worked with a number of ska bands over the years, so yeah, I do listen to a decent amount of ska music.
Yeah. Sometime I want to sit in with Woodbine, get some horns. They're like ska, but they have no horns, so you can only be so ska without horns.
Yeah. At their last concert, they actually added some strings, and they had some kind of interesting bluegrassy stuff, but they were still playing the ska style, the ska feel. It was interesting.
Yeah, nice.
But yeah, they could use some horns for sure. Anyway, I was listening to your new album, and this is something that I've noted in your older music as well, and it comes out right on the first track, Bones. Throughout a lot of your lyrics, there's a very strong biblical influence, it seems. That particular track alluding to Ezekiel 37. I was just curious if you could talk a little bit about how your faith has maybe influenced your music and what role that kind of plays.
Yeah, so that song, just to start there and build from it. And several other songs that are definitely based on certain Bible passages. There's certain things that I'm Catholic and at Mass frequently, and if they're reading, I think that's where it most often happens, that a reading will strike me more often than I'm reading on my own and it jumps out. But I was in Mass and the reading was Ezekiel 37, and I was like, the imagery is just so good for a song. And so I had this music that I had been sitting on for a couple of years, which doesn't usually happen, that I have music without writing lyrics with it, but I just couldn't figure out what went with it. And then the imagery is good in that verse, and then it also, there's another level of meaning that you can certainly apply to any time in your own life, like this theme of resurrection and bringing new life. And so, yeah, that was the inspiration of that song. But there's other songs as well, like on the first album, Uncircumcised Heart comes from Stephen's sermon before he gets killed, where he says, "You're so clean of body, but uncircumcised of hearts," which I thought was a great line as well. And then the song Figs, that was based on another one of my favorite, most interesting gospel stories, when Jesus curses the fig plant. And the apostles say, it wasn't even a time for figs. And he's like, you guys are chumps. It's always time for figs. So combining that with some other ideas. So there's definitely those ideas that come straight from the Bible. And then other songs, I would say that just my my worldview overall is influenced by my faith. And so I think that comes through in other subtler ways as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you mentioned something else that I'd written down, which is that Stephen song. And I know I've heard you play that song many times. I think, how long ago do you think you wrote that song?
Yeah, like 2016.
Okay.
Probably 2017 maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But I thought that was very poignant concept as well. It's interesting though, because I would come at this song or others that you've written as someone who has studied the Bible a lot, whereas probably other people walking to a coffee shop, that may or may not be the case.
Yeah,
and I was kind of, sometimes I've wondered, like, if someone walks in and they hear you singing like about an uncircumcised heart, like if you've ever gotten any interesting responses to that. Or
I haven't, and I do think about that as well, because I definitely, like, I don't set out to play to just a Christian audience, even though that is my own kind of worldview and upbringing. And so sometimes I do wonder, like, what their view of, that song or some other, like, figs, which is definitely, like I mentioned, that story about the tree, combined with kind of this idea of a narrator finding himself in hell and being like, well, I was a good person, how'd I get here? Like, just how that applies to people who come from a different background. I haven't really gotten a lot of comments either way on it. So,
yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I wonder if people kind of, like, get what it means or think they get it what it means, or they don't, and they just don't walk up and ask the question.
Right. Yeah.
But, yeah. I know you talked about how you maybe more subtly allude to faith in music, or how that's been an influence. And I know another song that you mentioned on Facebook recently was your new song, Bossa Nova.
Mm-hmm.
And you had put out there that you basically stole a line, I think a musical line, right?
Yeah.
From another piece.
Yeah.
And I know when I heard the song and I heard the lyrics, some of those sounded familiar in a way.
Yeah.
And the music did too. So I thought maybe I could recognize what it was. But you pointed out later that it was actually kind of an obscure Aquinas hymn, right? By Thomas Aquinas.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it's used a lot in some Catholic ceremonies, adoration and benediction. These two hymns are used as part of that.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're from a very particular subset, you'd be like, oh yeah, that's recognizable.
Mm-hmm.
Although even in a different style and lifted, I think it kind of blends in as well. So you might not still recognize it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that was definitely, that was one of my prouder achievements on the record, was weaving medieval philosopher into a bossa nova.
Nice. Yeah, I remember learning about Aquinas in my systematic theology classes in college, and I honestly can't remember enough, or won't try to articulate some of the things that he did, but I remember always very much liking his perspective when he would try to describe complex realities like the Trinity or other things in theology. So I liked that you were alluding to Aquinas, and I thought that was interesting. And you also mentioned how if you could figure that out, it would kind of tell you what the song was about. Yeah. So then I just made that connection today, what I think the song is about, because Aquinas wrote Summa Theologica, which was this gigantic, dense book of very profound theological observations. And I remember hearing that after he had written that, but before he completed it, he had this experience with God, like some sort of revelation, and then he looked at his work and he said, basically, this is all worthless in comparison to like what I've seen.
Right.
So that is
that's one of the lines in that the chorus. For all that I saw, these scratchings are nothing but straw. Yeah.
So I thought that was cool. But and I guess just to stay on the track for a while, you discussed how you were raised Catholic, are Catholic. And I was raised in more of an evangelical Protestant background. And you discussed how you're not really trying to play your music just to Christians, which I think makes the most sense for any musician or artist, unless they are maybe just creating worship music for like congregational worship. But I think something I've witnessed in evangelicalism that I think is maybe problematic is that we've created kind of a whole industry around quote unquote Christian music and
Mm-hmm.
sort of Christian entertainment. And I was wondering, growing up Catholic, is that something you experienced to some degree, or were you more just listening to classic rock and folk and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I don't think that Catholicism has the same kind of like production companies kind of that evangelical media has.
Mm-hmm.
Like there are some, but I don't think they're as large as like the evangelical VeggieTales, kind of media. So my influences were definitely a lot more varied than like just kind of Catholic produced things.
Mm-hmm.
And like I watched like Bible videos as a kid, but those were probably produced by Protestant companies. I don't know that those are Catholic. So there were like some of those things in like VeggieTales, but again, they're coming from other sources, and then definitely outside of that as well. I will say I am definitely interested in like reading, especially when I read novels, or I read a lot of fiction and try to write as well. But in music too, I do have an interest in like finding authors and musicians who are influenced in their work by their faith, whether that's Catholic or non-Catholic. I often find that more engaging, or it's interesting to me to see how they engage in that and how they do that, and have a music that is secular, or writing that is secular in its audience, but coming with that inflection of faith.
Yeah, and I feel the same way, and I definitely always find it fascinating to be able to maybe discover kind of what has influenced a songwriter in what they're writing. And so then maybe a good follow-up question to that would be, what does your songwriting process kind of look like? Is there a process, or is it kind of random,
Yeah, lately I haven't been super super productive in my songwriting. But in general, a lot of the songs that I have written, my process overall is like, I'll just kind of play around on the guitar, and usually I have some sort of music first. And then once I like have, I don't know, a riff or chord progression or something that I like, I'll just start singing along with it usually, and just like whatever comes to my mind. And then once I find like a line that I like as the first line, then I'll go from there. So a lot of the songs are written as like, okay, here's the first line. Now, what is that song going to be about, and what has to happen next? It's like a kind of a consequential from there thing. I have done it sometimes, like I mentioned about like being inspired by that Ezekiel 37 or some other things. Sometimes I'll go into it and be like, okay, this is what the song is going to be about, and I'm going to write that. More often, I like start singing, and then I know what the song is going to be about once I sing like the first line or the first chorus. And I'm like, okay, that's the direction I'm going.
Yeah.
But usually I've got like some sort of guitar part first, and then a first line, and then go from there and fill in the rest.
So the kind of melody of the song typically comes out of riffing a little bit, or does the melody come first?
The melody usually comes like with the random words that I'm singing along with it.
Okay.
So sometimes it'll adjust a little bit as I go and refine. But a lot of times I'll like have a guitar part first, and then that will influence what the melody is going to be. Yeah. Based on what fits with the chords and everything.
Yeah, I know I've written probably about 8 songs in the last year, and I haven't actually released any of them to anyone, but it's odd because I'm primarily a drummer, and then I like barely play guitar, and I know the keys on the piano and stuff, but sometimes I would just wake up even just with songs and even lyrics and like just like ready to write down and have a melody, or maybe it might be more spontaneous than that though. Like I might be doing something and a melody comes to mind and I start writing lyrics, but I tend to have to write them down and kind of complete the song in my head. And then I have to find someone else who's actually a better musician than me to like help me write down the chords or whatever. Okay. So
yeah, I would definitely say I'm almost the opposite, where that music is first and then I fill in the rest.
Cool. I wanted to touch on that faith aspect, but then I think something else that's great about your albums is that your music is varied in like both its content and music. So you have kind of a folk theme that runs throughout with some kind of rock vibes, but you also mix in little bits of jazz, or I mean, even like a sea shanty, like on this latest album, you have some accordion on Sail Away and stuff. Right. But that's something that I always enjoy when a musician just incorporates different pieces of different genres into their music. So.
Yeah, to put a positive spin on it, I like to call it eccentric Americana.
Yeah.
To put it less positively, I would call it eccentric to a fault.
Yeah.
Where you could say it's a little disunited. Because, it definitely like goes from Bossa Nova to this like Irishy sea lament to more straightforward like grunge rock to very folky kind of things.
Yeah.
So definitely, it bounces all over. I guess when I like have an influence rather than like synthesizing all the interests together, I like to like really dive into the genre or the thing itself, on the song. So like on the first album, there was a song that's like just straight like jazz lounge with a jazz trio, and as much as I could trying to hit like that kind of Ella Fitzgerald feel, and then go a completely different direction on a different song.
Yeah.
Whereas I think in some bands, and maybe it's, I guess it could have been a couple of things, but I think a lot of people like synthesize those interests and you can hear like bits of it in one. Whereas I think I tend to more fixate on the style itself in each particular song. So then it bounces around a lot more.
Yeah. Well, positive or negative, at least, I guess you can not, people can't say that it's not interesting. So,
that's true. That's true.
I think that's important. So, yeah. And another song that I enjoy on your previous album, which is called Calloused, if we haven't mentioned it, is Give Me a Dance. And I really enjoyed the kind of, you have like a little bit of a 60s, 70s kind of classic rock.
Yeah, it's got the Hammond organ in there and the Farfisa, which is like a obscure organ that is not used very often anymore.
Yeah, but that was a fun dance song.
Yeah.
And then I think a song that you've played a few times that I think might be your best lyrical song and also just kind of hilarious and observant is the Will You Love Me song. Yeah, which if I was going to describe it, it's kind of like When I'm 64 by the Beatles, but kind of like the uncensored version. Or like, have you ever read any Roald Dahl books?
Yeah.
Have you read the Twits? Have you read that book?
Yeah.
That's something that came to mind. I was like, it's like When I'm 64, but it's the Twits. Yeah. So.
Yeah, it's not particularly flattering. I always dedicate it to my wife when I play it, and she is somewhere between amused and revolted that it's dedicated to her. Yeah.
Maybe, for those who don't know, could you maybe say a couple of the lyrics or just describe the concept?
So it's like, it starts, I'll be so careful when I cut all the hair growing out of your ears. Though it's one of my fears to cut your toenails, tough as fear-striking scales that could disembowel me or shatter a jowl. Gently I'll hold all the free-flowing rolls of the fat that will fall from you, scraping the walls that you'll have to expand when you can't reach your hand to your feet anymore. Say goodbye to the door, etc. And then, will you still love me? But it wraps up nice. So that last chorus with a, yes, I'll still love you. So hopefully it ties to more than just a novelty song and has some emotional heft to it as well.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that perhaps it has even more relevance for me because I work in memory care. I'm a CNA and work in memory care and assisted living. And I see couples frequently who are, they have dementia or physical ailments, or they're just old and probably not as attractive as they used to be. And it's always, I don't know, I guess it's moving to me that like these people still do love each other and they stay together and they kind of put up with all these quirks and maybe they did end up married just because they kind of fell in love. They thought the other person was attractive and fun and whatever. But then obviously there's a point where appearances fade and even personalities can change or fade with dementia or Alzheimer's and other things. But yeah, they still stay together and continue to love each other. And I think that's cool. And I've even seen that in my grandparents on my dad's side. My grandpa and my grandma are both in their early 90s. And my grandpa is very sharp still and fit for a 90-year-old man. And he goes out and he gardens still and stays very active. My grandma is also physically healthy, but she has dementia now, so she tends to be very confused. And, I think that generally she kind of only knows who he is, but not necessarily who everyone else is. Yeah. And he has really taken it upon himself at this age to still take care of her, and that's something that I've thought about at times and has even made me almost tear up, or actually tear up thinking like, wow, what a great example of what love is, Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's cool.
Yeah. So yeah, you can get profound thoughts and reflections even from really weird songs and stuff. Yeah. So there you go.
Yeah.
Kind of moving on in a similar vein, but different. I didn't actually listen to the lyrics as closely on this song, but you had a song called Morose Joy on your new album.
Yeah.
And I also thought it was funny that the album artwork that you put on your Facebook page was a picture of a toilet with that title. So yes. I was curious if you could talk about that.
Yeah. So the Morose Joy is a story song that a toilet does feature at the end of the song. That's kind of about like a bad day that gets worse and worse and worse, and just like everything going wrong. And so it came like from not like the experience described in the song is not the experience I had, but having experiences of like things going bad and just being like so weighed down by things. Mm-hmm. And in the midst of that, or in spite of that, or even because of that, being able to like stop and recognize like joy and blessings. Mm-hmm. Be like, hey, everything is like really bad right now, and I have my toilet's leaking, and I have diarrhea, and I'm sitting here like just dumped and rained on and spit on, and everything's terrible, and yet things could be worse.
Yeah.
Like in spite of that, there are things that are good and that are blessings. Mm-hmm. And for me, it's a divine joy. Like in spite of the suffering, or even through suffering, we can feel God's love and like feel that joy. And I think that joy can act in anybody's life, regardless of whether they have faith in God or not.
Yeah, and I think that's all true. And I mean, I think something that we sometimes ignore in our culture is that frequently it's suffering and negative experiences, or theoretically negative experiences, that actually may bring the most growth and ultimately the most joy in the long run, if we're able to kind of accept those and whatever those experiences teach us.
Yeah.
Another song that you I think mentioned as being meaningful to you was the song Greyhound Bus.
Oh, yeah.
Which is really kind of a cool, I guess, soothing folk song, I think. But what is that song about?
So it's kind of I guess there's two parts of it. So when I made the first album that we did in 2018, I did a crowdfund, and one of the things was that I would write a song for somebody if they help support the album with a certain amount of money. And so a friend gave me the money for that and asked for a song for her and her husband's anniversary. And so I knew I had to write a love song for them for their anniversary. And so that was like the impetus to write it. Mm-hmm. And then again, it was kind of, playing a guitar part, something that I thought sounded good. Okay. And then I just start singing words, and the first line came, don't you close your eyes anymore. Don't you care to see? And don't you leave your boots on the floor. Ain't you coming with me? Mm-hmm. I was like, okay, so then where are they going? And so then that just kind of leads into the rest of the song. And I think, if I remember, that kind of just led into this chorus of, I got a one-way ticket on a Greyhound bus with a sleep car that's big enough for two. We ain't coming back again until we both remember when. Our love is all we knew we ever need. And so I don't think I really thought about what the song was about until after I had written that far. Mm-hmm. And then, I think that's one of the tricky things about songwriting is I feel like the songs that work the best, I don't know what I'm doing until it's done. So mm-hmm. it's like getting to the point where you've soaked up enough influences and you've had enough ideas that it kind of comes out without being intentional. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And I find for myself, if I'm trying to force something, it's a lot harder to make it come. Versus you write, I got that far, and I'm like, oh, this is what the song's about. Like, sometimes marriage is hard and sometimes a relationship is hard and we have to like work on it. But if it's worth it, we're going to do it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so then that idea kind of came out of the song, but I didn't go into it planning that. It's just kind of where the song went from kind of those first lines.
So I would think that it would be fairly difficult to maybe write a love song for someone else.
Right.
But in lieu of that process you have, do you think that maybe isn't as true as it could be?
Yeah, I mean, you definitely can't, like, you can't write a love song that's, you know, like super specific in that case. Or it'd be hard to, unless I was like...
interrogating them?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I'm going to find out these things about you, and then I'm going to write from this perspective.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like, for example, another song that ended up on the new album called Drinking to Drink was written very specifically for somebody else who did the same thing, who gave some money to support that first album.
Mm-hmm.
And that one is like, all the lines are kind of, for most of the verses, the chorus is a little bit different, but the verses are all like very specific to kind of experiences that we had shared when I was doing mission work in Belize and he was another missionary.
Mm-hmm.
And so that one was like, I couldn't have written that song for a different person's relationship, you know, because it was all things that were very my own experience shared with him. And so that kind of song I couldn't have really written in this case. But if you're thinking just more kind of generally of marriage and then kind of and relationship and putting yourself into kind of a constructed marriage, right? Because I wasn't like, oh man, my friends are having a hard time in their marriage, this is what they need to hear, you know. That wasn't what it was. But you can kind of put yourself into, I guess, the same thing you do with songwriting more generally, of like, okay, I'm going to put myself into this character and then write from that perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can do that in kind of the same way, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, and something you mentioned was maybe starting to write a song and then like later realizing what the song is about.
Yeah.
And I know I was listening to an interview with John Fogerty recently, who is one of my favorite musicians, and I'm actually hopefully going to see in about a week.
Okay.
But he wrote this song called Weeping in the Promised Land that he released recently, and he said that he had come up with the title probably 30 plus years ago, and maybe the title, maybe a line, but he never did anything else with it, and he didn't really know what it was about, but he held on to it.
Yeah.
And then in the last year, observing everything that's kind of transpired in our nation and our world, he looked around and he said, oh, Weeping in the Promised Land, that's what this song is about.
Yeah.
So then he said he finished the song, and it was the most difficult
Yeah.
song that he's ever written. But I just thought that was fascinating, that you could have a song that was unfinished for 30 years and then suddenly realize, oh, this is what this is for.
Now it fits. Yeah.
Yeah.
That is interesting. That's cool.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of which, what was it like kind of being a musician in the last year and maybe not getting able to play as much or at all? And did that maybe result in more songwriting or other things like that in a way? Or yeah.
It's funny. I think that overall the pandemic experience was like, if you are single or you don't have kids, like, I have all this free time. What am I going to do?
Yeah.
And if you have kids, you're like, I'm just trying to survive the day. The kids, we're with the kids all the time, and they're trying to destroy everything.
Yeah.
So my experience was, I have 3, now 4 kids since then. So I think that my pandemic experience differed greatly from somebody who didn't have that going on. But still, it was, you know, schedules are different, and there's nothing going on in the evening. And there was like a stretch of a month or so where I did write more. And one of those songs, Cemetery Stone, ended up on the album because recording got stretched out. And that was like the one that kind of rose to the top as the best, I think, of what I've written. But I wrote kind of several songs for a while there. In the summer, I've, like, the past several summers, since I teach during the school year, I have more time in the summer, and so I've been writing, like, fiction, a couple novels and short stories and different things. And so I was more productive in that last summer than in songwriting.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I didn't do a ton of songwriting, a little bit, and then working on getting the album wrapped up and produced and put out. And so I still did some productive things, I think, but not maybe as much songwriting as I could have done.
That's cool. Yeah, I had just started playing with a group of musicians kind of right before everything transpired. So that ended, unfortunately,
Yeah.
at least as far as being able to play out
Right.
with people. And I think being a CNA, the experience was also maybe a little different for me than for other people too.
Yeah.
I wasn't working at a hospital, so it wasn't maybe as crazy as it would be for someone working in that setting, but
Right.
I definitely was as busy or busier than ever. So I know lots of people were kind of sitting around out of work or trying to find work or dealing with other circumstances, changes. And for me, largely nothing changed except that there was just less to do outside of work. So
Right.
Yeah.
I definitely, I mean, I was lucky that I was able to keep teaching remotely throughout that whole time, and like gigging, playing shows was never like a super busy schedule or primary occupation, and so losing that wasn't like a huge hit like it was for people who are just musicians all the time, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I had a lot of other things that I was still doing.
Okay. I had just a random question about one of your songs that stuck out to me. What's kind of up with the drums on Angel Band? I heard that song, and it's one of the songs that kind of confused me musically a little bit. So.
That's true. Yeah, I have. So some of the students that I teach, there's one who listened to the album, and I teach him drums.
Oh, okay.
And he came in and he said, Mr. Cyr, you know your song Angel Band? I was like, yep. You know the drums? I was like, yep. Is that supposed to be there? I said, yes, it is. So the whole song, we played it live for a while before we recorded the album, and mostly confused responses, few positive responses, but it's one of my favorite. I don't know, I like the idea of it, which is so it's like taking this bluegrass song and giving it kind of a gospel-y feel, a la Johnny Cash in like the late years, like those last couple Johnny Cash albums where it's like really weighty, heavy piano, and it's those like old traditional songs that he's giving this weighted interpretation to. So it's got like that going throughout, and then the drums. So I don't know if you ever listened to the Bad Plus, but
no, I haven't.
Okay, so the Bad Plus is a jazz trio based out of Minneapolis / I don't know where they all are now, but they've got some songs that it's pretty exploratory jazz, I guess. Sometimes they like push the edge of tension, like as far as you can push tension. And so that was kind of the idea, was like building that tension in the drums, grinding over this like this pedal that contradicts the melody, and building like the tension as much as you can, and then it breaks into that final release. And like the Bad Plus show with Joshua Redmond that I saw once live down in St. Paul was like the best live show experience I ever had. And capturing that kind of that tension that builds to the point of like, okay, this has got to break, it's got to stop, and then you finally get that release. And then so over that particular song, because to me, my idea of it at least was like that tension and that drums is like the fight, the struggle of death, because that's the song, right? Angel Band. My race is almost done. Like it's about the end of life, looking for the angel band to carry you home to heaven. And so the drum is like that part of the human condition that fights against death. It's like, no, this is bad. No, like I don't want to be pulled in. No, I've got to fight for life. I got to fight for life. And then at the end of the song, giving up and being like, all right, going with the angel band.
Okay.
That's my idea behind it, at least, is the convergence of those different things.
Okay.
So I know it's definitely not the favorite track of most people probably, but I enjoyed it. Yeah.
Well, that is interesting, and now I guess people know the story behind the song.
Yes.
So they can either
hopefully they can enjoy it more,
understand, or they can go into it and then they'll be prepared.
They're prepared.
I don't have any other questions off the top of my head, but is there anything else that you'd be interested in talking about, or kind of telling to anyone listening? Or it's okay if there's not. So yeah,
that's a great question.
Yeah.
No, it's I just like to play, and I would like people to listen.
Yeah.
You know, having like being able to connect with people and have an audience, and anyone be interested in listening. I would say, like, if you listen to independent artists, local musicians, like they want to hear from you. They want to connect. I guess like before I started playing a lot, I was like, they don't really care. They're just playing, they're doing their thing. But like, it means a ton to me just to have a person be like, hey, I like the song, or I like the album, or like, I enjoy the show.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's very meaningful to me to have that kind of feedback and have like, oh, somebody actually enjoyed this. Like, I enjoy doing it, and I will probably do it, like playing Angel Band, in spite of if people don't like it. But if people do enjoy it, it makes it more meaningful to me
Mm-hmm.
to be like, okay, this is something other than just what I like to do in my spare time. But like, music, I think, is about connecting to other people.
Mm-hmm.
Like, an isolated music is pretty lame.
Yeah.
And so knowing that there's like that connection and that somebody does appreciate it and listen to it, I think means a lot to me. And so therefore I extrapolate to probably to other musicians who are struggling independent musicians, or who just do it on the side,
Mm-hmm.
It means a lot to have that connection to people who listen to it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so like, you taking the time to listen to the album and have questions about the album, like, is very encouraging to me. So thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome. And I definitely enjoyed the album, and have enjoyed your music in general. And I would strongly encourage anyone to go out and pick up the album and listen to your other albums as well, which they're all on Bandcamp. So that's one of the main ways they could do that.
Yeah, you can order a CD, or you can download it on Bandcamp. You can stream. The other thing that I have discovered since, putting out a couple albums is, if somebody streams an album on Spotify, the creator makes like 3 cents,
Mm-hmm.
maybe 5 cents.
Yeah.
Versus, so you gotta stream it a lot if you want to like support the musicians.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's a lot of people I listen to on Spotify and don't go out and support, but it has definitely made me want to support local musicians more.
Mm-hmm.
If I think that they're doing good things, I like the music, I want to buy the music rather than just stream it a couple times.
Yeah. So everyone go out and buy the album on Bandcamp, and then go to Spotify and stream it, and then put it on repeat. You don't even have to have the volume on. Just have it on repeat so Eric can get a few more cents.
Exactly.
Yeah. But yeah, thank you for coming on the podcast. And
yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun to talk. Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. And it's been great to have Eric on the show. Thank you for joining me on today's episode of the DeVaney Music Podcast. Today's episode was poorly recorded in my dining room with my Blue Yeti USB microphone. The interview segment was edited by Chris Cooner. The intro track was recorded by Barry Blair, the original guitarist for Audio Adrenaline. Thank you very much to Eric Cyr for taking the time to interview. The new album Songs to Sing Before We're Dead by his band Cyr and The Cosmonauts, again, that's Cyr, C-Y-R, can be streamed or purchased on Bandcamp, Spotify, and other major online music outlets. In fact, you can not only purchase the album in digital format, but you can also purchase it on a compact disc. You can do so at Bandcamp or in person at Wuso's Concert Cafe in Duluth, Minnesota. Thank you so much for listening, and please follow the DeVaney Music Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. This is a new podcast, so I very much appreciate your feedback as well. Stay tuned for our upcoming episodes with Derek Charles Johnson and Phil Joel of the Newsboys.